Have you ever felt an unexplainable connection with someone? So deep, so real, that it shakes the ground beneath everything you thought you knew about love, and yet, you couldn't be with them, no matter how much you tried, no matter how strong the pull. They came into your life like a cosmic storm, lit something inside you, and just like that, they were gone. And now you're left wondering, why? This isn't just coincidence. This isn't punishment. This is the universe speaking in a language far older than words, using absence to awaken your presence, using longing to guide you back to yourself. Because sometimes the person you can't be with isn't here to complete your life. They're here to transform it. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it, that quiet invitation wrapped in the ache. You were never losing them. You were meeting you. Now listen closely, because what you're about to hear may change the way you see every impossible love you've ever known. Sometimes, the most confusing kind of love is the one that doesn't stay. The one that feels like lightning through your veins and yet slips through your fingers like smoke. And in those moments, you ask yourself why. Why would the universe allow such a connection only to place 1,000 barriers between you? Why give you a glimpse of a soul that feels like home only to close the door before you can truly enter? But I will tell you this, it was never about possession. It was never about a shared life. It was about revelation. That person, yes, the one you couldn't keep, was not sent to fulfill your fantasy. They were sent to reflect your truth. There is a mystery that lives in human encounters, especially the ones we cannot explain. Some souls carry keys we didn't know we were missing. And when we meet them, something deep within us stirs. Not just desire, but recognition. A sense of familiarity that doesn't belong to this lifetime alone. It's as if their presence unlocks doors in the psyche that have long remained shut. Not because you were weak, not because you were blind, but because the timing of your awakening required their arrival. They come, and suddenly you remember feelings you buried, needs you denied, wounds you pretended were healed. They arrive like a mirror, not a clean, comfortable one, but the kind that shows you what you've avoided. The kind that doesn't flatter, but exposes. That's why it hurts. Not just because you can't have them, but because they make you face parts of yourself you've tried to forget. In their eyes, you see your longing. In their silence, you hear your fears. In their presence, you confront your own absence, where you have not shown up for your soul, where you have abandoned your truth, where you have settled for safety instead of surrender. You wanted love, and instead you were given revelation. And that is the most sacred kind of gift. The universe is not cruel, it is precise. It doesn't waste encounters. If someone has appeared in your life with such force, if your heart broke open in their presence, if your reality felt altered just by knowing them, it is because there was something dormant in you waiting to be awakened. You were not meant to keep them. You were meant to meet yourself through them. They are not your lesson. They are the messenger. And that message is not about how lovable they are. It's about how much of you still waits to be loved by you. We often think the pain comes from rejection or separation, but the truth is, the pain is much deeper. It comes from the realization that someone outside of us touched something we haven't touched ourselves. It's the ache of our own distance from our own soul. That person, unavailable, distant, or temporary, pulled you closer to yourself, even as they moved away. That is their role. They cracked the shell, they disturbed the surface, they brought the storm so that your roots could grow deeper, because comfort never transforms. But heartbreak? That is divine pressure, and pressure creates expansion. You might ask, why did it have to be them? And the answer is simple, even if it's not easy. Because your soul recognized theirs. because they carried the frequency, the vibration, the exact emotional texture needed to unlock what you had hidden. No one else could have done it. Not in the way they did, not with that particular timing, not with that particular wound. It wasn't chance. It was design. That doesn't mean they were supposed to stay. It means they were supposed to arrive with impact. And what happens next is not about them, it's about you. It's about whether you will run from the reflection or face it, whether you will collapse into self-pity or rise into self-awareness. The pain is real, yes, but the invitation is even more real. Will you see this person as a curse or a catalyst? Will you mourn the loss or receive the mirror? Because if you truly look, you'll see that they didn't leave you empty, they left you open. And open is exactly where love begins. Not the love you expected, but the love you needed. The kind that doesn't ask for someone else to complete you, but calls you back to the parts of you you once left behind. So often we believe that love is meant to last forever, that if it ends or slips away it was never real. But the deepest truths often come wrapped in the shortest encounters. And not everything true must be permanent. Some truths are momentary and yet eternal. Some flames burn only for a night, but leave a light inside you that never fades. What you had was real. It shook you, it woke you, and that was its purpose. Do not fight the design. Do not label it a failure. It was a mirror, not a mistake. And the one you couldn't keep was never sent to stay. They were sent to show you where your own soul lives, still waiting, still hoping, still longing to be claimed by you. And when you finally walk into that space, when you finally step into the self they reflected back to you, you will realize you never needed them to stay. You only needed them to arrive. Love that doesn't stay is often the one we remember most vividly, not because of what it gave, but because of what it stirred. We tend to believe that love is measured in time, in shared routines, in futures built together. But some forms of love are not sent to endure, they are sent to awaken. They come not as gentle rain, but as a storm that reshapes the landscape of your soul. And the person you couldn't be with, the one you still feel even in their absence, was never meant to. They were meant to stir something in you that comfort never could. There is a kind of love that feels like destiny when it enters your life. It moves through you like a tidal wave, unstoppable and inexplicable. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't follow rules or fit neatly into the life you've built. It arrives uninvited and leaves you exposed. And just when you think you've found something lasting, it slips away. But that doesn't mean it failed. That doesn't mean it was wrong. It means it served its sacred purpose. Because you see, there are people who enter your life not to walk beside you, but to shake you awake. Their presence disrupts the rhythm of your mind, the order of your emotions, the structure of your beliefs. They challenge the version of you that has grown too used to numbness. They disrupt your spiritual sleep, and with their very being they whisper, "Wake up. There is more to feel, more to see, more to become." We often curse these loves. We cry out in confusion, "Why send me this if I can't keep it? Why show me this if it's not mine to hold?" But the universe is not interested in comfort. It's interested in your expansion. And sometimes it uses love as the key. Not the kind of love that soothes, but the kind that breaks you open. That love is not chaos, it is precision. It is the exact vibration needed to shake loose the parts of you that have fossilized. It is the match that lights a fire under the old version of yourself, so the new one can rise from the ashes. This person you couldn't be with. They stirred the longing you buried beneath logic. They unearthed the dreams you'd forgotten how to dream. They reminded you of a part of yourself that had gone silent, a piece of your soul that had grown dim. And though you could not keep them, though the road never allowed your paths to run side by side, their presence did what it was meant to do. They woke you up. And sometimes the pain that follows isn't just about losing them, It's about losing the version of you that existed before they came. They shattered a structure that no longer served you, and the ache you feel is not just heartbreak, it's rebirth. The familiar is gone. You've changed. They didn't complete you, but they transformed you. And now your task is to live in alignment with the part of you they awakened, rather than chase their return. You were never meant to keep that flame forever. You were meant to burn with it for just long enough to remember how alive you could feel. Because before they arrived, you might have been sleepwalking through life, settling for what was good enough, convincing yourself that numbness was peace. But their love, brief as it was, reminded you of your capacity for intensity, for vulnerability, for truth. And once that door is opened, it cannot be closed again. You cannot unfeel what was felt. You cannot unknow what was shown. You can only rise from it. This is why love that stirs, even without staying, is sacred. It disrupts the stagnation. It cuts through the illusion. It reminds you that your heart is not a machine, it is a temple, and not everyone is meant to worship there forever. Some come only to light a single candle, and that single flame is enough to illuminate a lifetime. So don't curse the one you couldn't keep. Don't wish it away, or bury it under bitterness. Feel it, honor it, and then release it. Because to hold on too tightly to what was only meant to awaken you is to close the very door they helped you open. This kind of love isn't about possession. It's about becoming. It's about transformation. It's about being brave enough to feel everything, even when nothing makes sense. It's about trusting that your heart knows what it's doing, even when the outcome doesn't match your expectation. The greatest shift happens when you stop asking why they couldn't stay and start asking what they left behind. What part of you did they awaken? What dream did they reignite? What pain did they bring to the surface so it could finally heal? Because those are the real gifts, not the person, not the plan, but the awakening. And when you look back on it all, not just the moments of ecstasy, but the silence that followed, the ache, the longing, you will understand. They didn't come to complete your story. They came to begin a new one within you. They stirred the soul so it could rise. They reminded you that you are capable of feeling deeply, loving bravely, and surrendering completely. And that is the kind of love that never truly leaves, even when it no longer stands beside you. When the heart wants what it cannot have, when love reaches out only to be met with distance, it doesn't just break you, it awakens you. It begins as a quiet ache and slowly unfolds into a spiritual crisis. You try to understand why it hurts so deeply, why it feels like your entire being has been unraveled by someone who was never fully yours. But that's where the truth lies, not in the loss, but in what it brings to life within you. The one you cannot be with, the love that remains just out of reach, becomes a spiritual catalyst. Their unavailability doesn't close your heart, it breaks it open. We often confuse fulfillment with alignment. We believe that if something doesn't last, it was a mistake. That if someone doesn't choose us, it means we weren't enough. But that is the language of the ego. The soul speaks differently. The soul knows that not every encounter is meant to satisfy the longing, it's meant to amplify it. The pain of not having what you desire does something extraordinary. It cracks the shell of identity. It dissolves the illusions you've wrapped around yourself for safety. It humbles the ego and forces the deeper questions to emerge. Who am I without what I want? What is this emptiness really pointing me toward? Where am I still asleep? That person, the one you couldn't hold, the one who could never be yours, was never the end point. They were the turning point. They showed you the edge of your emotional map, and then they vanished, leaving you alone with the parts of yourself you'd forgotten how to feel. In their absence, something ancient rises. A voice you buried long ago, a tenderness you refused to offer yourself, a grief you avoided, a hunger for truth. And it's painful, terribly so, because the mind wants resolution, it wants clarity, answers, closure. But the soul doesn't operate on the same plane. The soul moves through mystery, it works through longing. And when the mind cannot fix what's broken, the soul finally has room to speak. This is the moment when transformation begins, not when you win the love you crave, but when you learn to sit with the ache it leaves behind, when you stop chasing what you cannot have, and instead begin to ask what it's trying to awaken in you. It's easy to think that the person is the problem, that if only they had stayed, chosen differently, loved you back, you wouldn't be in pain. But they are not the cause, they are the trigger. They pressed on something far older than them, a pattern, a wound, a need. Their unavailability mirrored the parts of you still disconnected from your own wholeness. And now you're left with it, not to suffer, but to heal, not to spiral, but to evolve. Pain has its purpose. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to purify. And in the absence of this person, you are invited to step into your own fullness, to stop reaching outside for the validation, the intimacy, the connection that must first be cultivated within. That is the spiritual evolution. Not the acquisition of another, but the reclamation of self. And paradoxically, it is often the one you can't be with who sets that journey in motion. You see, the soul doesn't evolve through comfort. It doesn't wake up when everything makes sense. It wakes up when something no longer fits, when life brings you to your knees, when the heart longs for something that seems so right and yet remains unreachable. That's when the layers begin to fall away, the armor, the pride, the distractions. And what's left is the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are beneath it all. You start to notice how much of your identity was wrapped in the hope of being chosen. You begin to recognize the ways in which you've abandoned your own needs to be acceptable, desirable, worthy in someone else's eyes. You realize how much of your spiritual hunger you've tried to feed with romantic fulfillment. And now, stripped of that illusion, you are finally ready to meet the deeper longing. Not for a person, but for presence. Not for partnership, but for inner union. That's what their absence reveals. That's what their distance makes space for. It doesn't mean you'll stop missing them. It doesn't mean you won't have moments of grief, of nostalgia, of quiet yearning. But even those moments become sacred, because you'll begin to see them not as signs of something broken, but as evidence that your soul is awake, that your heart is alive, that you were touched by something real, and it moved you so deeply that it changed the way you see yourself and the world around you. There is nothing shameful about wanting. There is nothing weak about longing. But when you learn to hold that longing with love, when you allow it to refine rather than define you, you step into a new kind of power. A power that doesn't beg for love, but radiates it. A power that doesn't chase connection, but embodies it. A power that no longer looks for someone else to fill the silence, but finds divinity in the stillness itself. The one you couldn't be with did not deny you love. They delivered you to it. Through the wound, through the rupture, through the ache, they forced you inward. And that, though painful, is one of the most sacred things another soul can ever do. Sometimes the most painful love is not the one that ends, but the one that never had the chance to begin. And when that person enters your life, and the connection is undeniable, the energy between you unshakable, yet circumstances keep you apart, it stirs something far deeper than romantic longing. It begins to surface a question that most try to avoid. What if you're not actually being punished by fate, but protected? What if the universe is not denying you love, but instead aligning you with something far more essential, your own inner wholeness? The mind doesn't want to hear this. The heart rebels against it, Because when you feel something profound with another soul, your entire being starts building stories around it. This must mean something. This must lead somewhere. This has to become real. But there are loves that don't come to stay. They come to sharpen your awareness, to humble your expectations, to reveal how much you've tied your sense of fulfillment to something or someone outside yourself. And sometimes, the reason they cannot stay is because if they did, you would lose yourself in them. That's the truth most aren't ready to face. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive to complete you. It arrives to show you how incomplete you believe you are. It magnifies the cracks in your foundation. It reveals the places where you've outsourced your power, and it brings to light the hidden belief that someone else's presence is necessary for your peace. But the soul cannot evolve in dependency. It cannot rise while still rooted in the need to be chosen. So the universe intervenes, not to hurt you, but to guide you inward. It blocks what the ego wants, so the spirit can get what it truly needs. And that's why the love that couldn't happen becomes so heavy. Because it doesn't just challenge your heart, it confronts your identity. It exposes the stories you've clung to, the fantasies you've romanticized, the fears you've buried. That person, as real as the bond may have felt, was never meant to carry the weight of your healing. And the truth is, if the relationship had been allowed to bloom fully, it might have satisfied your craving, but robbed you of your becoming. Because we don't awaken in the arms of another. We awaken in the absence. We awaken in the longing that lingers when they're gone. In that space, something extraordinary is possible. You begin to sit with yourself, not because you want to, but because there's nowhere else to go. The distraction is gone. The illusion is broken. And in the silence that follows, you meet your own soul. You see where you've abandoned yourself. You realize how often you've mistaken intensity for destiny. And most importantly, you begin to understand that just because someone activates something powerful in you, doesn't mean they are the one meant to walk beside you. Sometimes they are just the key that opens a door you must walk through alone. There is a divine precision in why some people can't stay. You might not see it now, when your heart still aches and your dreams still reach for them in the dark. But one day you'll look back and realize that if they had stayed, you might have stopped growing. You might have clung to comfort instead of transformation. You might have settled into a dynamic that fed your desire but starved your evolution. The soul is ruthless in its devotion to your wholeness, and sometimes that devotion looks like taking away what feels perfect in the moment, so that you can step into something more real, yourself. That's the paradox. The one you can't be with often gives you the gift you never knew you needed. Not the warmth of lasting companionship, but the fire of spiritual initiation. They don't just break your heart, they break the shell around it. They don't just walk away, they walk you back to yourself. And when you finally reach that place of understanding, you stop asking why it had to end and start asking what it began inside you. Because something did begin. A new awareness, a new strength, a new softness, and no one, not even the person you miss, can take that from you. It doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It was. It just wasn't sustainable, not at the level you were operating on at the time. But their presence lit a spark. And now your job is to build the fire. Not to wait for their return, but to become the kind of person who no longer confuses longing with love, or chemistry with compatibility, or depth with destiny. That's where freedom is found. When you no longer need the story to end the way you once imagined. When you can look at the pain and see it not as betrayal but as redirection. The soul always knows what it's doing. Even when the mind protests, even when the heart pleads, there is a deeper rhythm unfolding. And if you trust that rhythm, if you dare to believe that the loss is part of your alignment, then something shifts inside you. You stop chasing what left, You stop mourning what might have been, and you begin to bless it for arriving, for stirring, for leaving, and for revealing. Because some people are not your path. They are your portal, and through them you don't just fall in love, you fall into your awakening. There are moments in life when someone enters your world and everything you thought you understood about love, about timing, about connection, begins to unravel. It feels cosmic, it feels fated. And yet, despite the depth, the synchronicities, the signs you swear you saw in the stars, life does not allow you to be together. The timing is all wrong. The chapters you are living do not align, and so you part ways, confused, heart-heavy, unable to reconcile how something so profound could also be so impossible. But this is where the deeper truth emerges. The universe does not only send you people to be with, sometimes it sends you people to show you what lives within you, and often, the person you can't be with is not your future, but your mirror. They reflect the part of your soul that you have neglected, the desires you've silenced, the path you've strayed from. And in meeting them, something dormant begins to awaken. You start to feel again. You start to remember who you were before the world told you who to become. That reflection can be intoxicating, because they don't just show you love, they show you, the real you. The version that dreams louder, loves deeper, dares more bravely. And so it feels like they complete you, but in truth, they reveal you. And sometimes, when the connection is this intense, it's not meant to merge, it's meant to magnify. To magnify what you've forgotten, what you've buried, what you've feared, and their presence becomes a living echo of all that is trying to rise within you. But here is where it becomes hard to accept. The more powerful the mirror, the more painful the separation. Because you don't just miss them, you miss who you were when you were near them. You miss how alive you felt, how open your heart became, how light the world seemed. It's tempting to believe that only they can give you that feeling again. But that is the illusion. The feeling wasn't theirs, it was yours. They just woke it up. This is where growth begins. When you stop longing for the person and start integrating the parts of yourself they helped you see. When you stop waiting for them to return and begin to carry forward the truth they unearthed in you. Because they didn't give you anything you didn't already possess, they just stirred it. And now that it's been stirred, it's yours to nurture. So you begin the quiet work, the inner work. You take the inspiration they sparked and use it as fuel for your own unfolding. Maybe you start creating again. Maybe you finally confront the fears you've been running from. Maybe you say no to what once felt safe and yes to what now feels true. Whatever it is, you no longer move from emptiness, you move from awakening. And that awakening doesn't need a partner to sustain it. It only needs your devotion to stay present with it. There is a sacred kind of love that transforms you without needing to possess you. It passes through like a storm, leaving the soil of your being richer, more fertile, more alive. That person may not walk beside you, but they remain woven into the very fabric of who you're becoming. Not because you are stuck, but because you are expanding. And the role they played was necessary for that expansion. We often think the universe is cruel for giving us something so beautiful, only to take it away. But it is not cruelty, it is compassion beyond comprehension, because the soul does not grow through constant satisfaction. It grows through contrast, through the ache of what might have been, through the tension between desire and destiny. And when you lean into that ache, when you let it stretch you instead of break you, you begin to realize that love was never meant to rescue you. It was meant to return you to yourself. That is the power of someone you can't be with. They call you home, not to them, but to you. They remind you that you are more than your wounds, more than your past, more than your fears. They awaken the possibility of a life that feels like truth. And while they may never walk back into your story, what they activated within you will continue to write the next chapters. It's not about closure, it's about continuation. It's about choosing to live in alignment with what was awakened rather than in longing for what was lost. And when you do that, you honor them. You honor the love, not by clinging to its form, but by carrying forward its essence. You allow it to evolve with you, to breathe through your choices, to echo in your courage, to speak in your silence. Sometimes the person was not sent to stay because their role was never about permanence. It was about permission. Permission to feel again, to believe again, to dream again. And now, you must give yourself that permission. You must live the life their presence once hinted at, not as an act of rebellion against loss, but as an act of devotion to truth. Because in the end, their greatest gift was never their presence. It was the part of you that came alive when they entered your life. And that part of you is still here, waiting not for their return, but for your remembrance. There is a certain kind of love that arrives with thunder in its chest and vanishes like mist in the morning. It doesn't give you closure, it gives you questions. It doesn't promise forever, it teaches you about the depth of now. And when it's gone, it doesn't simply leave a void, it leaves a sacred wound, one that doesn't bleed, but burns. Not with hatred, not even with grief, but with transformation. Because sometimes, the love you cannot hold becomes the path that holds you. And you start to understand that the ones you cannot keep are often the ones who leave behind the most enduring echoes in your soul. You may try to forget them. You may try to silence their memory or bury it beneath logic and distraction. But love like that doesn't obey the mind. It doesn't disappear on command. It settles into your being, not as a weight, but as a whisper, not as a tether, but as a teacher. Their absence becomes a presence, and the lesson becomes clear over time. They were not the ending of your story. They were the beginning of your becoming. It can feel cruel at first how the universe allows such connection to ignite only to dissolve it in silence. But life doesn't move according to the desires of the ego. It moves in accordance with the evolution of the soul. And sometimes, the soul doesn't need a lifetime partnership, it needs a spark, a mirror, a rupture. Not every love is meant to be lived out loud. Some are meant to be carried quietly, as a reminder of what you are capable of feeling, what you are capable of becoming. There is immense power in the love you could not fulfill, not because of what was shared, but because of what it awakened. It showed you a level of truth you hadn't touched before. It stripped away your defenses, your pride, your illusions. It brought you back to your knees and to your heart. And though it left you raw, it also left you real. You were forced to shed who you thought you were in the presence of someone who saw through you without effort. You were forced to feel what you had long numbed, and in that vulnerability a deeper part of you was born. The irony is that you often grow most not with the people who stay, but with the ones who leave. Because when someone stays, you may lean on their presence as your source of meaning, but when someone leaves, you must create that meaning from within. You must go inward. You must build from what's broken, and that building, though silent and slow, becomes the architecture of your next life. The version of you that rises after a soul-deep love doesn't bloom into form, is the version that knows how to stand alone and still feel whole. What they left you with is not emptiness, it's an invitation to explore what within you resonated so powerfully with them, what within you lit up in their presence, what within you was trying to emerge through the chemistry, through the collision, through the chaos. It was never just about them. It was always about what they symbolized, a return to your inner world, a reintroduction to your capacity to feel, to ache, to long, to hope. And the lesson is not to chase them, it is to honor what was born because of them. So many seek closure through final conversations, explanations, neat endings, but the soul doesn't need closure. The soul needs expansion. And that is what this unfulfilled love can offer, if you let it. Expansion beyond the belief that love must be completed to be valuable. Expansion beyond the need to hold something in order to keep it. Expansion beyond the narrative that loss is failure. Because what if the only real failure is to feel something this powerful and then forget its lesson in your rush to forget the pain? They were a chapter, not the entire book, but that chapter rewrote you. It adjusted the tone of your story. And if you can carry it forward not with bitterness but with reverence, you become the kind of person who has truly loved. Because to love someone you cannot be with and to still bless them in their absence, that is a rare and holy thing. That is love unbound by outcome. That is love stripped of possession. That is love in its highest form. It's natural to want to go back, to revisit what might have been. But the deeper invitation is to go forward, with everything they stirred still burning in you. Go forward with the fire, not the fantasy, with the wisdom, not the wound, with the love, not the longing, because you are not meant to stay at the altar of what never fully happened. You are meant to carry that sacred fire into what happens next. And in time, you will see that the love you could not keep was not wasted. It was consecrated. It lives in the way you speak to yourself now, in the way you show up to life, in the way you feel things you once ran from. They may be gone, but they left a gift, a soul-deep reminder of who you are when your heart is fully open. And that gift is not meant to be mourned, it is meant to be lived. If this message spoke to something deep within you, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more soul-awakening truths. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their heartbreak has meaning. Turn on notifications so you never miss a reminder that your pain has purpose. Listen again. Sometimes the second time, your soul hears what your mind couldn't. Explore more videos to uncover the hidden wisdom in your most difficult experiences. You're not alone on this journey. You're not broken. You're becoming.